Next thing we need to do as the host is to be able to register our cage so then people can view it and maybe book it. That'd be great, right? So let's go over here and work with that. Now, the cage has to be associated with an owner through this soft foreign key relationship in MongoDB. So we're going to require an account, and that's going to look like just an error message. So like something like this. So we'll just say, if there's no account, you must log in first to register a cage. All right, so now we know we have the account. We're going to use that as part of it. And let's go ahead and figure out how many square meters this is going to be. So we'll say meters equals something like this. Now you might want to just directly convert that into a float, but I found as I was interacting with this application, like I'd accidentally like go to register a cage and I meant to list them. You want some kind of way to cancel out. So let's just suppose if they don't enter anything, they just hit enter, it kind of short circuits everything. So we'll say if not, something like this. So if they don't enter anything, we'll just bail out. So otherwise, we'll just say float of meters. So convert it from a string to a float. We're not doing error handling in this, right? You guys should probably add that, but we're going to just do this. And we have to ask a bunch of other questions. Is it carpeted? Does it have toys? Things like that. And let me just copy that over. There's no point in seeing you this typed in. It's just user input stuff, right? And then we want to go down and we want to actually register the cage. Again, we want to do this at our data layer, not here in our application code. So we'll say svc register cage. And again, that doesn't exist, but it's going to in a second. So we are going to pass the account. We'll pass the active account here. We'll pass the name of the cage. We'll pass whether or not it allows dangerous, just all of these items, whether or not it has toys, whether it's carpeted, and the meters. Okay, so we're going to go and call this function, which obviously doesn't exist yet, but PyCharm will write it for us. Thank you, PyCharm. So here we can say this is an owner. Here's the name and string and so on. There we go. And let's say this is going to return a cage, which we have to import at the top. Again, thank you, PyCharm. So this is very, very similar to the create account. We're just going to create a cage and save it. So we set all the properties and we'll call cage.save, and that's going to store it in the database. Now we want to remember, if we look over at our owners, it has cage IDs to manage the relationship. So the order in which we do this is super important. Now, we need to be a little bit careful with this account here. We want to make sure that we're getting the latest account from the database. So we'll do something like this. We'll say account equals find account by email, this active account dot email. So that makes sure that we don't have any stale data. Then we're going to go account dot cage IDs. This is a list, so we can append to the cage.id. Now, it's super important, the order here. We must call save so that this is an actual generated value. It's just none beforehand. So we want to make sure that's generated in the database, and then we can return the cage. So that little warning up there goes away because we are returning the cage. The other thing that we need to do is this has changed the account, but we haven't pushed those changes back to the database. All right, so our register cage seems like it's working. Let's go over here and let's do one more thing. This active account needs to have that data adjusted as well. So let's go over here to state, and has a reload account. That's not written yet. Let's do that. So this is super easy to do. All we have to do is go to the database and pull it back. So we have this active account global variable, and we can come over here and say import the service. And here we're going to say find account by email, active account.email. All right, that's all we got to do to reload it. So this will make sure that when we work with our state.active account, it's the fresh one that just got its data changed down here. Let's do one more thing before we carry on. Let's go ahead and implement register cage here, and let's spell suppress correctly. Let's add the ability to list our cages so that we can test that this actually worked. Let's also do a success message, registered new cage with ID. Make that an F string, actually cage.id. So we got to store that up here. Excellent. So now we've got our cage, and we'll see that come out. But let's go ahead and we're going to require an account again, which is the same info up here. And all we got to do is get the cages. So let's write something like this. We'll say cages equals service dot find cages for user. All right, got to write that function. There we go. Creates an account. Let's not call it active account. We'll just say account. And that is an owner. And it returns a cage. Actually, not a cage. What does it return? It returns a list of cages. So we got to go to the typing module. Here, typing, and do cage. Okay, perfect. So what we're going to do is we already have the owner. And because of our refresh account stuff, it should be fresh. So we'll have cage IDs. And we should have this account.cage IDs right there we can use. So now how do we query for this particular thing? We're going to do something we haven't seen yet. So we're going to come to the cage, and again, we're going to go to this objects, and we're going to do the query. But instead of saying, remember before we had email equals, and that did the query against MongoDB for testing equality, we have something different we need to do. We want to go to the ID of the cage, and we don't want to just say, well, it's equal to, it's not going to be equal to the list, right? We can't say .cage IDs because one is like an object ID and one is a list of object IDs. So we have to use a special operator. And MongoDB has all these so-called dollar operators. $set, $in, $not, $or, these types of things. And the way we work with those in MongoEngine is we use a double underscore to say we're applying this to the ID, but then there's this other thing that we're doing. I'm going to say in. So this query right here, maybe a little cleanup. This query says, go to the cage and find all the cages whose ID is in this list of IDs, right? And now we'll have cages equals, this is a query, but we want to execute the query and sort of snapshot it for our app. So we'll return cages, and that should make our app totally happy. That little warning went away. Okay, great. So we've written this function and we've used the in operator, the double underscore, to access it. Here's our cages. We just need to print them out. For C in cages. And let's make these F strings. And we'll come here and we'll say C dot. What do we want here? We want name. Let's also print out something like this. You have however many length of cages you have, and then we'll print those off. Okay. Let's try to test these two things that we've written. For host, we first want to register a cage. Actually, let's try to list our cages. Log in, Michael at talkpython.fm. And let's list our cages. You have 0 cages. Great. So let's register a cage. Now we're logged in. It'll let us. It's 2.2 square meters. Yes, it's carpeted. Yes, it has toys. No, it has no venomous. This will be Bully's cage. It looks like we haven't set the price. We've forgotten something, haven't we? Okay, so good thing we tested that here. Say price, and this will be, how much are you charging? All right, let's go add price here. Price. Cage.price. Okay. It was kind of annoying that crashed, but it's also cool. Why is that cool? Because, hey, we said the cage must have a price, and it didn't. If that was regular MongoDB, that would have just let that happen. But because it was MongoEngine, it did not. All right, let's do this again. List my cages. Whoops, list my cages. We have no cages. Let's register a cage. Do this again. How much are we charging? We're charging $29 a night. This is one fancy cage, folks. Boom, we've registered a new cage. Now, let's list your cages. Ooh, we have 1 cages. Maybe a plurality thing there, but pull these cages out. Let's register one more cage. is a huge cage. It's carpeted, it has all the toys, and this one's even for venomous snakes. This will be the large boa cage. Who knows? And this is 30, 39. Now if we look at our cages, we have 2 cages. Beautiful. So it looks like our registering and our listing cages is working great.